So in this video, we're going to build a 14 by 4 foot conference table. I'm going to cut one of my fingers off while doing it. We're going to use a sawmill to cut some really large veneers, and we're going to do a 4-way book match across the entire thing. So stick around and we'll see how it goes. So there all the wood is loaded in the back of my truck, having just brought it back to my shop from a kiln. So I got this log about 4 years ago. It came out of the front yard of a local museum, and the tree was dying, and they wanted a conference room table built out of it. So it's been air drying near my shop for about 2.5 years. Then I took it to a solar kiln and then to a regular kiln. And so now it's dry and ready to use. Now, the funny thing about this table is when I got this order 4 years ago, I really didn't have the skill or the equipment to be able to build this table. But I figured over that time I would develop enough skill and possibly get all the equipment needed to be able to build this. So as those years progressed, I had this table in my mind the entire time, knew I was going to have to build it, so I tried to buy equipment accordingly. And thankfully, it ended up working out, and I got everything I needed to be able to do it. Now, you can see me working on the slab for the top of the table, and it's pretty obvious that that slab is not big enough for a 14 by 4 foot table. It is only about 24 inches wide by 6.5 feet long. So I am filling this center crack with resin, and then I'm sticking that piece in the very end to bring it up to 7 feet and keep as much wood as I possibly can in there. And I think 4 years ago, I'd pitched a giant resin table to make up for that full 14 feet. And I don't even know if the client remembers that, but my style has changed a lot in the 4 years, so we are not doing that, and we're gonna try for this 4-way book match table, and that'll allow me to open that slab to get the 4 foot width as well as open it long ways to get the 14-foot length. And I'll explain that better here in just a second, but you can see this is a slab with the resin on it looking really bad. And this is where the wide belt really shines. So you just stick it through there a number of times and you end up with just a completely clean, nice slab, as you can see right there. And we got some good figure in it. You can see it's got some curls. That crack is completely filled, and that piece I added is looking pretty good. It looks relatively natural, but I think when it becomes the 4-way book match, it'll look pretty good. So now we're preparing this slab for the veneer cutting, and we're going to go to our guy, Mr. Boots on the Ground, to explain. All right, so this is the slab, all epoxied, dried, and flattened. I added this piece to fill this void, and here we have it, a straight edge flat slab. And what we need to do is cut 4 slices of veneer out of this at 3/8 of an inch each. And the sawmill right here, it cannot cut below 3/4 of an inch. So I used the vacuum bag to glue this onto this, and that'll give us something to clamp to, and then we can take 4 slices out of it. This sawmill is not made to cut veneers, so I don't know, it's asking it to do something it kind of is not made to, but I think it should work. We got the blade level to within a 32nd of an inch, so hopefully it just doesn't wave too much. And then once we cut the veneer, I built this, and we'll glue it down onto this and then send it through the wide belt to flatten it. And that thing's not made for flattening veneers, so you need something for it to rest on to raise it up so it can get it. And it's a very, very high stakes situation because I do not have another piece of wood, and if I mess this up, I really don't know what I'm gonna do, so hopefully it works. Now, hopefully that made sense, but basically we need to get 4 slices of veneer out of this, and I'm planning on 3/8 for each. And these bandsaw sawmills, that blade can wave a lot, and that is what we are worried about. And this wood is so hard. I'm not totally sure if it's live oak or water oak, but I mean, it is incredibly dense. So I bought some special hardwood cutting blades for this sawmill, hoping that I'll get as little wave in it as possible. Because, if it waves up, 3/8 of an inch, it's going to come through the top. And that's the big worry here. But here we go, just slowly cutting through it, praying that we don't have any issues. And yeah, first one went pretty well. As you can see right here, the cut was really not very good. I was not impressed at all with those blades. You can see how rough that actual cut is, and that is due to the blade waving. So hopefully that is just the only wave we're going to get. So we stick that slab through the wide belt, get the nice flat reference surface, and then go back with the sawmill and cut the next veneer. And at this point, I'm really excited. You know, this was just an idea I had. I really had no idea if it would work. I didn't know if this sawmill would be able to do it. So it really is an exciting moment, and we're cutting the fourth and final veneer right here to create the four-way book match. And I'm so relaxed about this that I am not watching the trajectory of that blade, which you have to get down and really pay attention to it, but it was waving like crazy. And you can see when we came out of the cut, it had waved so much that it left almost a paper's thickness left, and you can see the left over piece of that slab still stuck on that piece of MDF. And I do not know what caused this. If anyone has any idea what could have done this, let me know in the comments. But regardless, it happened, and we have to use this piece. So the only thing I could possibly imagine doing is just gluing it back together. So spreading glue on it right there and trying to line up the saw mark so that we can get at least a pretty flat panel. And you can see it's vacuum bags gluing it back together. You pull it out, and it ended up, it glued back, and there wasn't any really noticeable damage. You can see where it came through the end of the slab right there. And then along the side, you can kind of see the trajectory of the blade and how it was running along the bottom. And then for whatever reason, near the end, it just raised back up. But that was very, very disappointing and scary. And yeah, the other three pieces are useless without this one. So regardless of anything, we have to move forward. So we cut it again on the sawmill, and this time we just cut really far into that particle board, and you can see it right there. It's still got particle board all over it, but we just ran it through the wide belt over and over to get rid of that, and then tried to get it back to the thickness of all the others. And I had said earlier in the video that this wide belt could not sand veneers, but I had never actually tried it. And the reason I thought that is because I didn't think the table could raise to the sanding head close enough to do that, but it cannot do that electronically. If you manually raise the table, you can get it close enough to sand veneers. So that was a relief when I found that out. I was very excited to figure out it could do that. And here we got all the veneers sanded to about 1/8 of an inch, and we were just trying to figure out the best way for the book match to go. And I sprayed it down with some mineral spirits just to get an idea of how it was going to look, and you can kind of see it right there. So this is a really exciting moment. It looks like this table could end up being cool. And now we just need to get each piece of veneer glued onto a piece of substrate, which I'm using 3/4 inch Baltic birch. And you can see the vacuum bag just rapid fire gluing all of those down. And once we get them out, we need to very carefully remove the exact same amount from each. On these book match tables, if you remove too much from one side, then it's not going to be a mirror image of the other. So you just take your time and make sure you're taking off the exact same amount from each so that they'll get a nice mirror image and the seams between them will be good. So this four-way book match table, this is something that I have not seen done on a table. I'm sure someone has done it. People do crazy things with veneers, but the idea actually came from guitar building. So this is a relatively common practice in guitars. And I was really excited when I came up with it because making a slab double the width and double the length is not necessarily easy to do. So this was really the perfect application for it. And it gave me a really good opportunity just to cut my own veneers and kind of learn how that entire process works. And of course, I learned that that wide belt can sand veneers, so that'll be really useful in the future. So now I'm just preparing each side of the table to be glued together. And before we do that, I want to veneer the bottom of each. So I talked about it in my last video, but you want to veneer both sides so that one side's not absorbing more moisture than the other. And we're using a white oak veneer to do this. And you can see I got the veneer in the center, and then that exposed plywood, that's where I'll put the false edges on it. So I do that to reduce weight, and I'm kind of starting to wonder how much weight it actually saves because it's kind of a lot more work, but we'll see if I continue to do it. But now we're going to get this whole thing glued together, and this is by far the biggest clamp operation I've ever done. Boom, good glue squeeze out. So it ended up working. And these clamps, I had to get coupling pieces to put a bunch of poles together to be able to do it. but it ended up working pretty well just using that table as a flat reference surface. But this video is a really good illustration of me creating a ton of extra work for myself. So those exposed plywood edges I just talked about, those need a piece of plywood that is veneered to go on it. So I'm cutting the strips right there, and something that would have been very easy to do would for me to have veneered that piece of plywood before cutting it up. And of course I cut it up and then thought about that. So I had to go through and veneer every single one of those individually, which is just ridiculous. But next time I'll hopefully think of it before. And now we're just applying those to the bottom of the table, and you can kind of see the grid across the bottom and the sections that are left open to reduce weight. But now we're cutting up a slab and getting some slices out of it to use for the edge banding. So obviously we don't want exposed plywood edges. So that's what I'm doing here, just breaking down this piece of wood to create some nice strips for edge banding. And you can see my cousin, the guitar builder from Sylvan Guitars, coming in to help me with this. And we just use a ridiculous amount of clamps to try and get that edge banding seated. And it really wasn't enough clamps, but it got the job done. And you can see I leave the edge banding proud, so I come back with the track saw and flush trim all that. Now, this is some interesting footage because I believe it is the last known footage of my left hand with all 5 fingers on it. The accident happened the next day, and my hand actually went into a joiner. So it was a pretty bad injury, a lot of damage to the hand, lost my ring finger, got pins in the other 3 fingers, thumb didn't get hit, but it hurt really badly. And I actually posted a video on my YouTube kind of explaining how it happened, what the injury was, and how you can prevent it. So definitely check it out if you'd like to. But I'm 33 years old. I had a real good run with the hand as it was, and I'm hoping it won't affect me too much going forward. I'll get the pins out of these fingers in a couple days, and we will just move forward. That's about all you can do. So anyway, there was the edge banding. I'm coming through, flush trimming that up, and thankfully I'd gotten this table to kind of a point where it just needed to be sanded and finished before the injury. So obviously got injured, had surgery, came back, and was able to get it finished just with one hand. And you can see me right here, spray and finish. I got my hand tied up in that suit. Got open wounds, so obviously don't want that finish getting into those wounds. So was able to get 2 coats of shellac on it, and then 2 coats of Renner 688, which is a catalyzed water-based finish. Works really well, very durable. And here the top is all finished up. So the 4-way Bookmatch ended up working out. It got me that 4-foot width as well as that 14-foot length. So I think it was a really good use of the slab they gave me, and we were able to get the size they wanted. And the Bookmatch looks really cool in my opinion. I think it all turned out good. Edge banding looks good. So that is the top. So now we need to build a base for this table. And the base we're going to go with is a George Nakashima style base. Normally it's just got the 2 legs, but I added a 3rd to support this big tabletop. So a lot of different sections of that base. So we need to start breaking these slabs down into smaller pieces that we can mill down into those different legs, beams, cross beams, etc. So that's what I'm doing right here with the track saw. Break it into chunks, and then I take it to the bandsaw to quickly break it into smaller pieces. And then we start milling those, and here I am using the joiner without push paddles. It kind of gives me anxiety even watching this. This was obviously before the injury. Kind of did all this stuff at once, so the injury was near the end of the base and the top. But yeah, so we're breaking these pieces down, getting everything cut to length with the miter saw, and here all the pieces are laid out kind of how they're going to be with the base. Everything just cut to size. There's no joinery cut in these, so that is exactly what we need to do right here. And this is basically 12 bridle joints. So nothing too crazy, but it is a lot of bridle joints. So bridle joint is what you can see right here in this 3D rendering. It's that joint going from the leg down into that cross beam. So we need to lay out and cut 12 of those mortises. And I don't actually know if they're called mortises, but bridle mortises, whatever they are. And if you've watched my other videos, you've seen me do bridle joints, and I do them on the table saw with a tenoning jig normally. But these are too deep or tall for that table saw blade to reach. So we're going to do it on the bandsaw. And we just set up a stop block and cut the sides of these mortises. And we leave all that wood in the center, as you can see. And that wood between the cuts is what needs to be taken out. And definitely the best way to do that in this situation is going to be on the drill press with a Forstner bit. So you just get a Forstner bit that is wide enough that it just reaches those bandsaw cuts. And then you just come in from one side, hog it out, flip it over, and come in from the other side until you get rid of all of it. And of course, the nature of that Forstner bit, it just being round, is going to leave a little half moon shape at the very bottom of the mortise. As you can see right here, that's obviously filmed the wrong way, but we readjust the stop block on the bandsaw and just go through and just barely trim all that out. And we're not going full depth on this mortise yet because these machines are a little rough to do a finished surface. So we just go about a 16th inch proud, and then we take a chisel and a little guide block on top and just chisel all that out. And we constantly are checking with the square to make sure we're staying square to that outside face and not diving that chisel in or anything. And there you have it. All the mortises, or again, whatever they're called, cut out. But we need those to slide into something on the cross brace, and that's what I am doing with the dado stack on the table saw. So those are the cross braces. We'll just get those all cut in, and you can see them right there. So legs and cross braces with the bridle joints cut in them. And you can see Siggy sitting right here. This is a dog from Rover that I was watching for the week. She was really good. She wasn't running away, so we appreciated that. But she's sitting next to those beams, and we need to create a half lap going through those cross braces so it can pass through. So we're just going to find the center, lay it out, and then take it back to the table saw and cut those half laps using the dado stack. And you can see me just starting to do that right here. Perfect. So now we need to cut that exact same half lap into the beam, which I'm doing right here again with the table saw. And then we take the cross braces from the legs, use this tapering jig, and cut the angles into the tops of those cross braces. And then we have angles cut on the ends of it as well, and we use the miter saw to do that. And that gives a little flare, makes it look a good bit better, as you can see there. So going to get it all sanded down, laying it out. You can see all the joinery right there, the beam with the half lap, the bridle joints. Obviously, that beam isn't long enough to reach across the whole table. We just didn't have a piece of wood long enough, so it's going to be joined in the center of that middle leg. But yeah, so now we need to just double check the fit of everything to make sure it can be glued. So that just worked out amazingly well. I was really surprised how well all those went together. I guess I laid it out right, but I also got pretty lucky on that one. So I was very happy with that. So now we got to prepare everything to be glued together. So I'm going to go through and tape all this. And this took forever. I started to doubt myself halfway through that it wasn't worth it, but that is just to prevent having to sand glue off of it once it all squeezes out of there. And it ended up, I think, saving me a lot of time. So there it all is, all the joints taped up and ready to go. So we'll just get some clamps laid out, apply some glue, and get all these things clamped together all nice and tight. And we'll put the little hand clamps on there just to make sure those are fully closed and everything's seated. And we do that times 3. Now, the legs are sitting a little proud of that cross brace, so we're going to use the edge sander to take those down. Now, I brought this off Facebook Marketplace. It's really useful for stuff like this, but you got to be very careful with them. They take away a lot of wood, and you'll mess something up really quickly with these, so you just got to go very carefully. And here are the legs, all sanded, ready to go. And these things, I was pretty happy with how they turned out. They're really pretty. I really like the design. George Nakashima is really famous. Obviously, he knew what he was doing. But with the figuring and everything, it went together really well. So I actually had to go back and redo some of those half laps so that the beam would fit in there. So I just used a chisel to take off just a little. So here we go with a pretty stressful glue up, getting all these things put together. And I ended up adding some runners going from the tops of the legs to the other tops of the legs just to increase the stability of that base, because otherwise it was depending on that bottom beam to hold it all together. So that helped out a lot. And obviously I am missing footage, but that injury just really threw things off for me. And I ended up sanding it down and finishing it like the top with my hand injured. So I didn't get any footage, but here it is in its final home, and I was really happy to get this thing delivered. I was stressing about it while I was laid up with the injury, but finally got it done and really got some blood, sweat, and tears truly into this table. So it was a relief to get it to them, and I think it was just a really cool tribute to the tree. So that was a big, wide spanning tree that had come to the end of its life in the front yard of the museum, and it's just really does give it a second life to be able to bring it into the museum, and then now it's their conference table. So I think the tree would be happy about it. I was certainly excited to be able to do it, and it wasn't wide enough or long enough for just a single slab top, but I think this four-way book match was a great way to get it to the width and length we needed. And of course, the tree provided us with some really cool figuring, and yeah, overall, just a really fun project. And I really appreciate you guys sticking around and watching. Go check out that injury video if y'all want to. And if you have any ideas for how to make these videos better, please let me know in the comments. But I really appreciate the support, and we'll see you guys on the next one. Thank you.